Mini episode 1278 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Quick note at the outset. Regrettably, the back half of this great conversation was lost. We apologize for that. The Stanley Cup Final picks. Steve picked Tampa in 5 or 6. Russ picked Dallas in 6. And I picked Tampa in 6. Hello everyone, welcome to FDH Lounge Mini Episode 1278. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here, and we are bringing back the combo that we had for last year's Stanley Cup Final preview. We are going to be previewing the 2020 Stanley Cup Final with the same two gentlemen, one of whom we always have on every year. Another one we just added to the mix last year going into the final, and it was tremendous to have him on. I speak, of course, of Steve Violetta. He is an executive for the Edmonton Oilers and has worked for other sports teams as well in the NHL, specifically the Nashville Predators, Ottawa Senators, my Detroit Red Wings, other sports as well here, Staten Island Yankees, some time there. Steve has spent a lot of time on the business end of things for many top franchises, and it is great to have his perspective on things. And Steve, great to have you on, coincidentally, on the ground from the site of the Stanley Cup Finals. And if somebody would have told you that 6 to 9 months ago, you would have thought, great, our team's in the finals.
Yeah, exactly. It's I'm just like everybody else. People say, hey, have you been going to any of the playoff games at Rogers Place? And no, I'm not in the bubble. I'm watching them on TV like everybody else.
Well, I know you have an awful lot of familiarity with the logistics on the ground there, and we'll get into that, about some of the things about that arena and some of the things about Edmonton that led the league to select it for not just the Western Conference playoffs, but now the Stanley Cup Finals as well. Other gentleman that we have on the line is longtime FDH Lounge Dignitary, proprietor of Sportsology, author extraordinaire, including what I believe is his latest book, Sticks and Stones, How College Hockey Prepares You for Life. At the very least, that's his most recent hockey book. I speak, of course, of good friend Russ Cohen. You want to check out at Sportsology. He's got a column just up today previewing the Stanley Cup Final. We'll touch on some of the same things here, and we'll get to his prediction later on in the show. Russ, good to have you on. As always, good buddy. Nobody better to have on to talk hockey with, my man.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Rick. I mean, it's over a year since we talked about the last cup, which it shouldn't be, but it is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with the fact that it's over a year, the fact that it's on neutral ice, all these things that, again, when any of us started getting these tinglings, and I started a little bit earlier than some last winter about what this COVID-19 thing was going to be. I marked the date specifically. Sunday, March 1st was a day that I really read a lot of things, and things started popping into my head, and things had been sort of percolating a little bit. Even in the days before then, I'd been warned by some friends of mine about what was coming, some very forward-looking friends. And subsequently, again, you get to the middle of March, the league is shut down, the restart plan comes about. So I guess on that note, I want to start with you, Steve, from your perspective and being intricately aware of all of the business facets of everything in the NHL, specifically with everything on the ground in Edmonton there. How did the process sort of unfold for Edmonton, not just to become one of the two hub cities, but in the end, the hub city, the one that hosts the finals as well? What was that looking like as the process was going on and talks were happening with the organization?
Well, as you'll recall, the regular season ended maybe 13 games left for most teams. And talking at the time, they were going to do two bubbles in the playoffs, one in Vegas, one in Chicago, perhaps, at least best thing. But there was a flare-up, obviously, with COVID in the States, and they started looking north of the border. Toronto ended up being the East bubble, and Edmonton ended up being the West bubble. And they've done a great job in Canada in general and in Alberta in particular, with putting a clamp on the virus as soon as it became something that people had to worry about. Alberta's about 4.5 million people total between Calgary and Edmonton and everybody else. About 4.5 million people. And there's only been about 220 deaths from the virus the whole time. So we were locked in. We had good protocol going. And I think one thing that really put it over the top for Edmonton anyway, which I can speak of, is there's a JW Marriott brand new attached right to the arena. So the teams that stayed there literally never had to go outside. They went right from the hotel through a walkway and into the arena, and that was the perfect bubble for everybody.
Yeah, sounds like it with the logistics. And those numbers on the deaths are very impressive as far as how low they've been, because where I live on America's North Coast in the Cleveland, Ohio area here, Cuyahoga County, I mean, we don't think of ourselves as particularly hard hit, but it's like 500, 600 dead. And, you know, I tell people it's remarkable when I see that, like, our death figures are greater in our county than all of Australia, for example. You know, I mean, when you start comparing some of the death numbers in the States, even the areas you don't think of as being bad, and I don't think anybody would think that Cuyahoga County's been hit particularly hard, but yeah, you start comparing it internationally, and I guess it has been. To turn the question to you, Russ, from an NHL media perspective, as they were going through the whole restart process and as everything was sort of percolating, what were your thoughts and expectations for what the bubble was going to be like relative to how it's played out?
Oh, I had faith in the bubble. Like, I was a early bubble announcer, if that's such a thing, and was really kind of confused when other sports didn't want to do that.
Me too.
It didn't make sense. Didn't make sense to me. I had put a lot of research into it, and it's the best way. Like, I'm in an area that really wasn't hard hit at all, but recently, now that school is back in university, there's a couple hundred kids on the university that have the virus now. They're supposed to be locked down in the university, but, you know, for kids, who knows?
Sure.
So that, you know, that's created some tense moments here in this town, but I think it's relatively under control other than that. But, yeah, I was an early adopter for the bubble. I went on to the NHL conference call, and I got to tell you, that's when things changed for me. Like, I knew it was going to be good, but then I realized how good. And I have to say, the one thing I give the NHL most credit for, and I wouldn't have thought it would end up in Edmonton, and no slight, Steve, but a lot of players were saying they thought they'd be too bored. And that was an issue early on. Probably heard that. And so I thought maybe they would lose the fight because of that. Because so when they were in Toronto, you know, they got to play over at BMO, and that seemed to be a little bit more exciting for them. But end of the day, it turned out to be great. And last year, Steve told us about the Marriott. So I remember using that and writing about it. And I was impressed with what they did and what they did with where the Oilers play. And the fact, when I saw that they were putting a build into this place, Rick, like they would for a WrestleMania, I was like, you know what? This is really smart. I can see why they would want to have, you know, the conference finals and the final there. And it's going to be tremendous in that regard because that was good foresight.
Absolutely, and again, I've been watching the Stanley Cup playoffs and the NBA playoffs in about equal measure, which I know the same probably cannot be said for you, Russ, but I'm sure you've seen it. You've seen enough to know that the NBA is approaching it the same way. Basically, turn it into a studio, make the most of it. Don't let it just be a dull, drab, empty arena. And both sports, I think, get high marks for the way that they've made those places come alive.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I can say is on the Stanley Cup media frenzy today, might be Cohen that basically said that, hey, you know what, this feels exactly like playoff hockey should feel. We know there's no fans here, and we love the media day the way it normally is with all the buzz with reporters here, but as far as the play goes, once you're playing, it feels the same. And, you know, I don't think it was contrived. I don't think players were saying that to make the real league feel good. I mean, they sacrificed a lot of time to be away from their family. So I really do believe them, because I think if they were unhappy, I think they would gripe about it. And so, to me, yeah, the play is falling off. Actually, if we want to count a sport that's just bizarre, you can look at baseball and just see how weird or bad the pitching is and other things. And you look at this and you say, other than a few bad games early on when they were doing maybe the play-in part, not even the what they were calling the playoffs. But a couple of those games, there were some rusty players out there, but the play's been really good all throughout the playoffs, and especially in the conference final. And so, yeah, I feel like we haven't lost anything, and I also feel like this is a very legitimate season where nobody's going to look at the season and say, all right, you know what, we're going to have to think about this differently than other cup victories.
Right. Yeah, the stakes aren't imaginary. I mean, players are going to get their names on the cup. They're going to get to have the cup for a day. I mean, it's all the usual trappings that come with it. You will be a champion the rest of your career, the rest of your life. I mean, the stakes are the same as they've always been. One thing I want to ask you, Steve, from the perspective, and maybe this is just sort of like the hockey nerd in me of things that I remember, but I remember a lot of epic series. I remember having a lot of fun watching it on ESPN back in the day in the late 90s, some of them Dallas-Edmonton series. Is there any chatter up there in Edmonton these days about, hey, I remember those series over 20 years ago? Because those were a lot of fun. Dallas always had the better team on paper, but those series were so fun and competitive.
The Oilers have got a great tradition, obviously, a great group of alumni, and in the glory days, winning those cups back with Greg and MCA and Coffee and Kevin Lowe and Grant Pure, and try keeping that team together payroll-wise. That's another whole discussion for a radio show. I got to be honest with you though, Rick. The fans here are ready for a new generation of Oiler championships and winning. They get a little tired sometimes of looking backwards, and that's really because the team went through a drought where they didn't make the playoffs for 12, 13 years. And, they roll out the old timers every once in a while when they close Rexall plays, and then they roll them out when they open the new building, and that was the 40th anniversary of the stuff. That was the greatest team of all time, as voted by the fans. At some point, the fans were, whoa, okay, we like it, we like these guys, we appreciate it, but, we got Draisaitl, and we got Connor, and we got Nurse, and, why don't we make some of our own playoff history now? So, that's been a thing that we've had to deal with on and off in the last couple of years.
I can imagine that. Yeah, I mean, there's a sense, and particularly again, I mean, if there's a better young 1-2 punch in the league than what you guys got, I haven't seen it anywhere. So, yeah, I say that quite enviously as a Red Wings fan. I remember when that used to be said of us once upon a time. Now we're the guys envying other teams, but. I guess from what you said, Steve, I guess I'll start on the Tampa Bay side of things, because when you're talking about franchise building and the kind of things you were getting into there, this has been a long-term project in Tampa Bay. You go back to the drafting of Stamkos in 2008, and then subsequently the work that was done by the guy, somebody who you worked alongside in an organization at one point, my greatest sports idol, Steve Yzerman, as general manager of Tampa Bay, and somebody who is not going to get his name on the cup, but I think a lot of people are going to acknowledge for his work done if they get over the hump this year. And when you look at that, if you're a team like Edmonton, it strikes me that the model that you're looking at is Tampa Bay, the way they've gone about things. Now, that's assuming they finish the job this time around. They last got a good look at it 5 years ago. A lot of us didn't think it would take too long for them to get back. I remember before the season picking Tampa and Dallas to be in the finals, but this was like 2016, 2017. I was a couple of years early. But as far as the progression that Tampa Bay has made with the forward depth and the explosiveness there, Hedman anchoring a really good blue line, Vasilevsky in goal, picking up nicely from what Ben Bishop had done years earlier. it seems to me that that's the model that probably just about everybody in the league is looking at. If you can maximize these high draft picks into something really sensational.
You know, I'm talking about the Red Wings just for a quick second.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about Eiserman, I think one of the differences between this team that I've noticed, having been around sport and played as a kid coming up, one of the big differences is we're still lacking that veteran leadership on the Oilers. I mean, Connor's the greatest player in the game, no question. Quiet guy, though.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's a quiet guy. He's German. He's not gonna get the locker room riled up. It's not in him. And we tried to have guys like Lucic, Matty Maroon. We brought veterans like that in to try and get that veteran element going. But in Lucic's case, especially, you got to have the street cred if you're going to call other guys out, right? And this time here, I'd love to be trying hard, but I mean, he couldn't even catch a pass, by the end of it. So I think that's a huge issue that we're going to overcome yet. And when you start looking at this matchup in the Stanley Cup Final here, it's interesting. You start checking the boxes, and on paper it looks like Tampa. They've got the best goaltending, they've got the top defensemen, making a better record over the playoffs recently, et cetera. But, we'll get to Dallas, I'm sure. Well, Dallas has got this veteran team. They got 9 guys that are 33 years or older. Many of them have never been in the final. This is their kick at the can. This is their shot. So it's going to be fun to watch.
Absolutely, and I've got a statistical breakdown that we'll get to on Tampa and Dallas, maybe as we're segueing from Tampa to Dallas, because Tampa Bay, again, as you said, sort of the prototypical team you would expect to be here, and when you're looking at that type of veteran leadership on a team, you bring in guys like McDonough, you bring in guys like Shattenkirk, and ultimately, again, I think that's one more way that Tampa Bay is sort of the model for a lot of the younger teams like Edmonton there, if you can just augment it with the right pieces to help get you over the top, which is what they're aspiring to do right now. As you look at it, Russ, again, this is a team coming off of a historic heartbreak a year ago. I think one of the absolute greatest upsets of the 21st century, particularly how it happened, getting swept by, let's face it, I mean, a really good Columbus Blue Jackets team, but that was a historically great Tampa Bay regular season team. And to be able to come back, this is almost sort of reminiscent. And it's funny because Tampa had the best record since, I think it was the Red Wings the year before we won the Cup. And then we won the Cup the next year. I mean, Tampa Bay is right on track to do what the Red Wings did the next year, which is just bulldoze through any kind of obstacles in the way, get the job done, use it as motivation, fuel for the fire. That's what I see when I see Tampa Bay playing right now.
Well, I mean, I can't say they bulldozed their way because Nelson would have buried a shot in overtime.
True.
We'd be talking about a different team.
True, but it's been a great run, though.
Yeah, it is, and that's the way hockey is. I can go back to 2015 because I was at that Game 7 at MSG, and I remember Ryan McDonough warming up for the Rangers on the ice, and I saw that he was having trouble with his foot. And then just sort of shook his head, and I immediately texted a buddy of mine that said the series is over. Like, McDonough can't play. That McDonough can't play. They won't be able to contain these guys, and they couldn't. And then Tampa won. They clinched the Eastern Conference Final berth there, and that was a big deal. And they ended up losing to the Blackhawks. But this team's different. They've made some moves. Goudreau, Coleman, those things were smart. Vasilevsky was a rookie back then, and the way it was put today was he was thrown into it in 2015, and I think that's fair to say. Now he's a veteran, so yes, he is the best goalie in the playoffs. Like, nobody's going to deny that. It's interesting though because the dynamic of Bonus, who was their assistant for so long, I posted an article early on in the playoffs about is Bonus the best coach in the bubble. And yesterday or day before, Alex Suinan, if you remember, he was a coach for the first European coach for the Blackhawks back in 2000. And he posted about Bonus because apparently back in 1989, Bonus was an assistant at Winnipeg, and Alpo went to Moncton in the AHL, and then the next year he went to Winnipeg when Bowness got elevated to coach, and well, actually no, same staff. He wasn't coach, but he was still an assistant, and Sunan was on the same staff, and so yeah, Bowness has been waiting all the time, right, going back since then, and he's waiting for a shot, and then he was the longtime Tampa assistant, and he was so he and Cooper are very cordial. They know each other very well. Cooper actually said, because of the way the bubble is, before Game 6, he saw Bowness and already congratulated him because he had moved on, and of course, Cooper hadn't just yet. And, and they talked for a minute, and, that's the kind of oddness that's going to go on in this stuff. But Bowness has his fingerprints on everything. So you do kind of wonder, even though Tampa has a better team, and I don't want to use team of destiny, but you do wonder, like, is there something with this Dallas team? Because, like Steve pointed out, they have certain players that have waited so long. Well, they also have a coach that finally got a shot. So, there's a lot going on here.
While Tampa has been through its own turmoil in terms of underachievement a year ago, you just sort of put your finger on it. The Dallas, over the course of the last year and a half plus, has been through plenty of their own.
Yeah, no question. I mean, but again, I always tell people, you always run into people and they say, hey, I picked the Stars at the beginning of the year, and, my simple answer is, well, if you pick the Stars, that means you picked them with Jim Montgomery as coach and Ben Bishop as the goalie. That's what you picked. You didn't pick them as Rick Bowness as the coach and Anton Hudobin as the goalie. That's not what you picked. So I have to make that distinction because this is how odd this year is, and this is a completely different team. It was a completely different team at the Winter Classic when I was there. When Bowness took over, they went from being this all offense, no defense team to a very defensive team with some offense. And so, it's been a big transformation.
It really has been, and they're the more interesting team. I think no question about it. Tampa Bay is just a team that looks to be flat out dominant as far as the talent on the roster. And you look at Point and Hedman, who have been the best players that they've had in the playoffs. But ultimately, I think coming into the season, most people, myself included, would have said Kucherov's the best player on the roster. And he's not getting as much pub during the playoffs, although he's still performing. They haven't even had to go to Stamkos. Dallas is definitely more interesting as far as how they're doing it. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to bring out our FDH Ultimate Quantitative Baseline Rankings. This was coming into the playoffs. So this was prior to everything in the bubble, how the teams ranked against one another. I start with our power rankings. We had Tampa 3rd and Dallas 13th. There's another formula that we have, though, in terms of, or I'm sorry, that's their formula number. So they were placed 3rd in the formula. Dallas was 13th. In the final power rankings we did, Tampa was 4th, Dallas was 10th. We have a formula that is 1/2 power rankings, 1/2 strength of schedule. Tampa was 16th, Dallas was 6th. So level competition is one of the rare areas where Dallas trumps them, being in that brutal Central Division. Power play before the bubble, Tampa was 5th, Dallas 13th. Penalty kill, Tampa 14th, Dallas 17th. Fenwick 4, Tampa 13th, Dallas 26th. Fenwick against, Tampa Bay 7th, Dallas 11th. Shot percentage, Tampa 1st, Dallas 28th, a little bit of a spread there. Save percentage, Tampa 9th, Dallas 2nd. They were better on that. Even strength goals, Tampa 1st, Dallas 30th, an even bigger spread there. Even strength goals against, Tampa 4th, Dallas was 1st, though, in that. And again, coming out to a cumulative 3rd place in the overall rankings for Tampa, 13th for Dallas. And this is one of these things, and we'll look at the particulars of it, but, when you look at this Dallas team with Ben and Pavelski, and, ultimately you throw in Perry and some of these guys here, Steve, with this thing happening with this thing happening in a western city, Steve, I'm sort of reminded of that old country song, I ain't as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was. I mean, you look at Dallas, they got a chance to rest up from the regular season. Some of these guys sort of to channel more of themselves from when they're in their prime. They have a lot of rest coming into the Cup Finals. I mean, I'm not saying, Steve, that we necessarily should have seen this coming with Dallas, but the competition of playing great regular season competition in that division, plus the time off to let some of these older guys the last couple of months get their legs back, you know, in retrospect, yeah, maybe we should have seen Dallas coming.
I like Dallas is so interesting for so many reasons. And if you're a hockey fan, you've got to be really excited about watching these playoffs and seeing Heiskanen come out of nowhere for most people, right? I mean, the guys that are in hockey and see the game, they understand how good he is. But he's leading the team in scoring. He's making big plays. I just love their back line. I mean, I think they've really come into their own in the playoffs. And then you throw in the veteran forwards. You know, Perry's got a cup. He's been around forever. And then I got to go back to bonus for a second, too, because that's just such an amazing story. I first met him many years ago in Ottawa when he was an assistant there, but bonus has got more games behind an NHL bench as a head coach or assistant coach than anybody in the history of the game. This is his 45th year in hockey as a pro, 38th as a head coach, and he's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. Like we talked about, he was with Cooper when they lost in the finals in Tampa back in 15. He was the associate coach with Crawford in Vancouver in 11. So this is his shot, too. This is a guy who, I mean, Rick Bowness is, like I said, most games of anybody, and he doesn't have a cup. So you can't help but root for a guy like that, too, who's a nice guy. And with the 3 days off, not just the veteran forward guys, but it's going to help him to have a couple days off, mentally think about where he's at. Because, you know, like Russ said, man, when we started this year, Ben Bishop was the guy. When we started the playoffs, Ben Bishop was the guy, but now Cohen started, 18 of the last 19 games, and it's interesting to see the 2 Russian goaltenders battle it out in the finals. It'll be fun to watch.
You know, Steve, many good points there. And among them, when you're talking about the emergence of Heiskanen as a potential franchise player, which is what he's looking to be, you know, that's one of those things here where I think when you're looking at the strength in goal throughout the course of the year, you know, you not only have Heiskanen there, but somebody who, for my money, has been one of the best defensemen in the league for years in John Klingberg. I mean, that's a heck of a 1-2 punch, Steve.
Oh, yeah, and I like watching Klingberg, the way he gets the puck to the net on the power play, just kind of sips it through, doesn't fire it in the guy's chin. And I'll give you one stat, Rick, which I saw today, doing a little background work for this. Heiskanen is going to go into the final having logged 539 minutes and 54 seconds in the playoffs so far. That's 9 full games he's played.
Wow.
60 games. It's unbelievable, which I think. He gets crazy amounts of time.
That's incredible. That's incredible, and it shows how valuable he is to them. And this is one of these things where, you know, you look at this, and, this is one of these things, Russ, where you've got a couple guys in this series that are right up there, I would say, with your King Henrik as far as the best players over the course of, let's say, a decade or so career never to lift a cup. There's obviously Stamkos. You got to think he's going to be back in, even if it's briefly during the series. But certainly Jamie Benn belongs in that conversation as well. And I went back and I looked, because we do our FDH rankings every year of the top players in the game. Not from a fantasy sense, but just if you were starting a team, how would we rank them? And this has been the trajectory with Jamie Benn. And this is the way a lot of times it goes for power forwards. He was 8th on our list in 2014, 5th in 2015, 3rd in 2016. From there, 2017, 12th, 2018, 13th. He was not on the list in 2019. And yet he has had a tremendous resurgence during these playoffs here. And again, something where when you're talking about players with an opportunity to really cement themselves in history, there may be none bigger than Jamie Benn if he is able to play a big role in them winning this. And quite frankly, I don't see Dallas winning this if he doesn't play a big role.
No, but he's definitely had a resurgence, especially in the playoffs. I mean, he had double hip surgery about a year ago, I think. So, you know, you got to say that that's probably been a factor. He certainly was banged up before this. And right now, yeah, he looks great. They've even played him outside of that top line and started another line with him. That's how good he's been. And he's been able to take over teams with the forecheck and playing in the crease, which is, by the way, that's something Tampa doesn't do. They don't play in the crease at all. So that, you know, that's sort of a difference in the two teams as well. But yeah, at Heiskanen, I went back in that draft, and I believe I ranked him like the second best defenseman. And so, yeah, I probably am kicking myself too because I know a few people liked him better than me. Some really good top-notch draft guys who were, you know, he can scout him like 20 times, whatever. I don't have the ability to do that. So I'm not shocked that he is great, but he's even better than I thought he would be. Certainly as good as a few of my buddies knew he would be. So that's interesting. You go look at Hedman. The interesting thing about Hedman was at the draft, there were people that were like, well, I don't know. I don't know if I would have drafted him there. I think he went second, right? And then for, I'll say 2 years after, people will start talking like, well, he's not really coming around. What if he's a bust? And, you know, you get on the call today, it takes guys just a little bit of time, and especially if, you know, you're putting that much on